How is it going, guys? Welcome back to a brand new video. Now today I'm going to be giving you a complete guide to player switching in FIFA 21. Now there are two different types of player switching, and I'm going to go over the pros and cons of both, and then we're going to talk about a common question that's asked from players, from Silver 1 to all the way to verification. When should you player switch, right? So the first thing I'm going to go over is the two different types of player switching, which is player relative player switching and ball relative player switching. Now, the differences are the central point of focus when you're right stick switching. Obviously, if you're L1 switching or LB on the Xbox, everything is going to be the same. But as far as right stick switching goes, player relative means that the central point of where you're switching. So when you right stick switch, think of it as a clock face, right? Now, with player relative, the player that you're controlling, okay, that player is the focus point of that clock face. So if you were to go 3 o'clock, say I'm the team in white, as you can see. If I go 3 o'clock, then I'm gonna switch in this direction, okay, with the player that I'm controlling. Now, ball relative switching means wherever the ball is, that is the central point. So obviously the clock is then focused around where the ball is. Now, people like to use, obviously the default player switching setting is actually player relative switching. So if you haven't touched it, you'll be on player relative switching. Now, the pros of player relative switching are obviously it's a much more sturdy central focus point, if I say it like that. So the reason I say that is because with ball relative switching, one of the main cons, obviously, which is the pro of the player relative switching, is that the ball is always moving so much. Now, obviously, you talk about players moving, and of course the players are going to move inevitably, as they would, but not at the same speed that the ball can move. So, for example, if I'm running this way with a player, if I'm running up the pitch, okay, with a player, and I want to right stick switch over here to Semedo, it's going to be fairly straightforward for me to do that with the right stick switch. So quickly, do a 1 o'clock switch, okay, 12:30, 1 o'clock switch. Now, ball relative switching, obviously this isn't the greatest example, but because the ball's moving so fast, so for example, say if Boltsy here, say he passes it into Neymar there, okay, now instead of doing a simple 1 o'clock switch to Semedo, the ball's moving, which means that the angle of the switch is ever changing. So if he plays it in there, by the time the ball's halfway, it's gone from a 1 o'clock switch to a 12 o'clock switch, and then by the time the ball's got to Neymar, it's then an 11 o'clock switch. And that is where the main focus of the negatives of the ball relative switching lies, is that because the ball's always moving so fast and so quickly, obviously the angle is always changing. So as I say, he passes it to Neymar, and all of a sudden you're having to think about flicking your right stick in the 1 o'clock direction, and then all of a sudden you've got to do it at 11 o'clock. So that's the main thing with ball relative switching. Now, the reason people might prefer ball relative switching is actually because it's sort of, because it's the focal point of the game as a whole, the football. You're always going to know where it is. So sometimes when people are switching, they feel like they can get lost with the switch, and if they switch to the wrong player, that focal point, they've almost lost it. Whereas if they were on ball relative switching, they can just focus on the ball. They're never not going to be focusing on the ball, and so that makes it easier. But the one thing I would say about that is that because L1 switching will always bring you to the closest player to the ball, it's absolutely fine. If you switch to the wrong player, if you get lost, just press L1 and you switch to the player closest to the ball. So that tends not to be a problem, and I think that's why you'll very rarely see people using ball relative switching. But obviously, if you do and you like it, fair enough. I would probably suggest switching back to player relative switching, just because I think getting used to it, getting back used to player relative switching will bring you to a much higher level than if you stuck to ball relative switching. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show a few clips and a few examples of where people struggle to know when to switch, and no, hopefully your player switching will be much better. So guys, here is quite a good example of a situation where people don't know exactly when to switch, or people switch late, and they need to recognize the signs of when you need to play a switch that little bit earlier. And you know, obviously, as we know, FIFA is a very marginal game. It does come down to fine margins, and these are the sort of fine margins that will get you that extra win in Weekend League, or get you that extra goal to push you over to a win in Weekend League. So, as you can see, I put the pressure on here with Renato Sanchez. I'm controlling Renato Sanchez. I see that ball going into Pogba. I'm controlling Renato Sanchez. I go and press. As soon as Pogba receives that ball and I notice him start to turn, I know that there's only two different places that he can now go. This pass is completely locked off by Mbappe. So we can't pass it to his right back. He can't pass it here because Renato Sanchez is here, and obviously the angle that he's at makes it almost impossible to pass to Mbappe there. So the only two things that he can do, he can either go backwards, which at this point where I am now, it makes it absolutely impossible to stop. If he wants to pass it back, that's absolutely fine. I don't need to be worrying about that. And the only other place he can go once he's made that turn is there. Obviously he can hold on to the ball, but that's not a problem because if I want to switch back to Renato Sanchez, I can put pressure on. So the only place I know he's going to go is up there, right? So I notice the turn, boom, I switch to Mendy and try and get in front of him. Obviously I fail in that endeavour, but I do try and get in front of him. Now, the next part of this little clip actually is me making a mistake. Now, the mistake I make is when I've pushed up to try and win the ball with Mendy here. Obviously, his Lucas does a 1-2 pass and an L1 pass to the right back. So when he does that, I need to recognise that, and I should really probably drag Mendy back. And I think this is a lot of the trouble that people face, is that they struggle to deal with 1-2s between strikers and wingers. Now, if Lucas had decided to play that ball in there to Mbappe, and it's a very similar thing here, but if he decided to play that ball into Mbappe, and obviously I've missed out on the tackle, I haven't tackled him, what people tend to do is then focus where the ball is, where the ball has moved, and the player that they want to switch to. Now, if I'm in this situation here with Mendy, what a lot of Gold 1, Gold 2, Gold 3 players will tend to do is they will tend to almost forget about Mendy, forget that they're controlling Mendy, and as I say, put the focus onto this situation developing here. And what that means for most people is that they'll drag Mendy up slightly to probably about here. They'll drag Mendy up to here. And obviously by that time, Lucas has made that run. And then they switch slightly late to Varane here, to the point where he can't make that tackle without Lucas being in down the line. And I mentioned that because that is a lot. I don't know if it actually happens in this game, but that is a lot of the trouble that people face, is that they dive in and then they disregard the player that they're controlling, and they almost put all of their focus on, where the ball has gone and the player that they want to switch to, and then they switch slightly late. And so what people should do here is they should notice that Lucas is playing the ball back, and I'm going to move to this actual in-game situation now. They should notice that Lucas is playing the ball back, and what I should do, I should drag Mendy back. I should drag Mendy back and make sure that pass cannot be made. But what I actually do, I think I noticed that there is a chance that I can win the ball back here if I switch to Mbappe. So I switch to Mbappe, and I get lucky actually, because he's taken a really poor touch and the pass has taken ages. But really I should have been punished here because this was a really bad player switching by me. I should have dragged Mendy back, but instead I put my focus onto where the ball was and I switched to Mbappe, and luckily I got away with it. But that is just one of the many situations where people don't know when or how they're supposed to be switching. Now in this situation here, a lot of people, once they've taken control of Mendy, they will try an L1 switch here when the ball gets back. But the only risk I would say of that is to make sure that if you notice this play developing instantly, so as soon as the ball gets to Lucas, if I just take it back another couple of seconds, if I notice that ball is going to go back there straight away, then you don't want an L1 switch. You want to do a right stick switch at a 3 o'clock angle, effectively, to take control of Mbappe, if that is what you're planning to do. Now, the L1 switch is fine once the ball gets to probably about here, because obviously, as I say, it switches to the closest player to the ball, which would then be Mbappe. So that would be absolutely fine. But if you notice this really quickly, then obviously you can't L1 switch because it's going to L1 switch here, and then you're controlling neither of the players that could win the ball. So I would probably recommend using a right stick switch here, even though you could L1 switch, just because of, you know, you don't want to right stick switch too early. You don't want to L1 switch too early and get the wrong player. You want to take the right player and you want to win that ball back. So that is, again, one of the things that people sometimes struggle with when it comes to player switching. Okay, so here we have another situation which is actually very different. This is more about player switching in the midfield, when you should switch and when you should sort of press and how much you should press. So the ball comes in here from a throw-in, absolutely fine. I make sure I'm watching that pass back, so he cannot go back to his right back, which is great. Then I switch to my fullback, and the reason I do that is because I know that if he wants to play the ball down this channel here, Varane's got it covered, and then Joe Gomez has Neymar covered, and you know, it's a 3 against 2 here at the moment in my defence. So I'm not worried about this ball being played in behind here. I'm going to put the pressure on with Mendy. Now, I want to get close enough to him to the point where he has to move the ball, but not enough. You know, I don't want to get too close to him to the point where he can play a 1-2 off Pogba and then get in behind me. I want to get close enough just so that I make sure that he can't make any ground in this direction up here. So I get close to him. That's about close enough, and then I switch to Renato Sanchez. Now, the reason I do that is to put pressure on the one pass that he can actually play. Now, obviously, as I've said, he can play that ball in behind, but I'm not worried about that because I've got Varane here who's going to clean up. So that's absolutely fine. And as I've said before as well, he can go back to his defender, no problem. I don't mind. You keep hold of the ball. That's absolutely fine. But what I don't want is him to get the ball and him to be able to run at me. So in this situation here, once I've done a right stick switch, and obviously it has to be a right stick switch at about a 6 o'clock angle, because you know I can't L1 switch here because I don't know whether it's going to switch to Mbappe or Renato Sanchez. It's a little bit of a risk, and that is why right stick switching is, you know, it is the way to go. Right stick switching is so. Just because of, you know, the randomness of sometimes L1 switching, obviously it's going to take the closest player to the ball, but when there's literally margins in it, you know, it's sometimes a risk. So a right stick switch here. Now, I don't necessarily want to cut this ball out. It's not that important to me. I just want to make sure that by the time Pogba gets the ball, if he gets the ball, I'm either right in his face or I take the ball before. So the ball actually comes in, and it is a poor pass, but because of when he passes it, Pogba's sort of moving away slightly and I'm moving towards it, I can just nick the ball off him. And I think a lot of people in the midfield in this sort of situation, they would switch to Mendy, which is fine, but then as soon as they don't necessarily wait for the point where they get a good enough distance away to make sure that they can't travel, but also not dive in and, you know, play a 1-2 with Pogba and then in behind. So a lot of people there would probably press with Mendy and actually try and make a tackle with Mendy, which makes it really easy, as I say, for him to play a 1-2 and get him behind you. And even then, you know, if somebody was controlling Mendy, they might stay in this position, they might jockey, and instead of putting pressure on and trying to win the ball back by switching to Renato Sanchez here and trying to take control of this area, they'll be much more passive. So, you know, it gives your opponent much more space and more time, and this is exactly what I don't want. So when even if I stay here with Mendy, I don't want him to play the ball to Pogba and have time to turn and space to move the ball, because realistically, a lot of the play at the moment is clumped up on this side. So if he plays it to Pogba and I'm not right in his face, he can just play it across here to Kante, and then he's got loads of space to work with. And obviously, you know, as you can see from the radar, my right back's all the way up here. So, sorry, my right back's all the way back there, which leaves a big gap that up here. So it's just these little things and trying to put a bit more pressure on your opponent without making it so that they can get past you easily, and that is one of the main things that people actually do struggle with when it comes to player switching. So here we have a somewhat similar situation to the last one, in that I want to use my midfield, I want to move them as it's more of a unit, and when I say midfield, I mean my left back and my centre mid. I want to move them together as a unit to put pressure on. Now, I lose the ball quite high up here with Mbappe, which is absolutely fine. Now, what I do is, I believe I L1 switch there. So as you can see, the little icon was above his head ever so slightly. So I L1 switch, and then obviously I don't really want to be controlling Mendy because I'm worried about this guy maybe running in behind him. I don't want to put pressure on here with Mendy, so I should switch again, and that is absolutely what I do. I right stick switch down here to Renato Sanchez to put a bit of pressure on, and you know, obviously I think I overstepped ever so slightly with Renato Sanchez. So when I step forward here, okay, I'm putting the pressure on. I'm making it at least so he has to play it back to Lucas there, and he can't turn and play across here. So he plays it back to Lucas, which is fine. And then, actually, although I overstepped, it's not really a problem because obviously I had Mendy covering, so it wasn't really an issue. So I overstepped to put the pressure on, which is fine because then, obviously, you know, he plays it back to Lucas. Let me just stop it where it is. So he plays it back to Lucas. I then switch back to Mendy. I believe with an L1 switch, which would probably be absolutely fine there because obviously there's only one player really in the vicinity of the ball, other than the player that you were already controlling. So I tried to block off the passing lane. I get very unlucky. Obviously, I think he plays it through my legs. But that is the absolute right thing to do. It's more, a lot of player switching is about being alert, reacting quickly to changing situations, and you know, some of the main skill gap of FIFA is, you know, making decisions in the right decisions very quickly. So obviously, yeah, I've made that right decision. I've got unlucky because it goes through Mendy's legs, but then I quickly switch to Varane and make sure I don't dive in. I sort of pull away a little bit from the attacker, and you know, I move away to the point where it's then safe to try and make the tackle, which I do. And as I say, a lot of people that I watch when I watch their gameplay, and this is anywhere from Silver 1 to Elite 3, their player switching is slightly sluggish in the sense that they're doing things like half a second too late, and by that time they've already missed the opportunity to put the pressure on, make the tackle, and they either make the mistake by then continuing to put the pressure on and they leave gaps in their defense, or they're very passive and they give their opponent a lot of time and space, really. So that is another thing that you know, that people really do struggle with, and that is why I'm making this video, to try and help those people and improve their player switching. And the only real fix I would say to this is just practice. You have to practice your right stick switching. You have to sort of get quicker, and eventually you'll start to notice more the signs of where you should play a switch. So as I said with the first clip, the Pogba, when Pogba receives the ball, I notice he's about to turn, and then I know where his angles are. I know where he can pass, and I know that I want to block off any potential forward passes. Therefore, I switch instantly. And as I say, practice makes perfect, as it is with everything. And eventually, you will start to pick up the signs and notice the signs of you know, where you should switch and when you should switch. Okay, so in this situation, again, it's a very different situation, but it's largely the same things in terms of knowing when to switch and how far you move your players before you switch and stuff like that. So the ball gets played in here. Now, I'm controlling Varane here. Now, a lot of people would ask, why would you not switch to Joe Gomez to put the pressure on? Now, the reason I don't want to do that is because if, for example, if I press here with Joe Gomez and Neymar is to do a ball roll or any sort of skill move to get past me, then the ball that he's going to play to Mbappe, which he's inevitably going to play because, you know, Mbappe's a really quick player and he'd be through on goal. So if I press there with Joe Gomez, that leaves sort of more this area and for him to play the ball in behind. Now, that area I think is a very dangerous area, obviously, because, you know, he's then through on goal, and that is not what you want. You do not want to ever be in a situation where your opponent's through on goal. So what I decide to do here is, because Mbappe seems to be running this way, but obviously if I move Joe Gomez out, he's got a free sort of path at goal. So Mbappe seems to be moving this way slightly. So with Varane, I put the pressure on, and then if he wants to play that ball in behind me to Mbappe, which he actually ends up doing, instead of going this way, almost directly towards my goal, the pass goes this way, which takes it away from goal. So I'm not really too worried about Joe Gomez being one-on-one here if I put the pressure on with Varane. And I think I could switch back to Renato Sanchez and try and pull him back. but you know, I'm an aggressive player. I want to win the ball, but win the ball high up, and you know, obviously I'm 1-0 down. There's plenty of time, but I do want to get a goal. So I put the pressure on with Varane, and obviously he does some ball rolls, plays it in behind. But as I said, because I didn't switch to Joe Gomez, the ball that he plays actually takes him out wide, which then gives me an opportunity to pull Joe Gomez back ever so slightly. So yeah, I'm controlling Joe Gomez. I pull him back. I switch to Varane, and actually that wasn't an accident, because I want to make sure that he's got a lot of ground, and obviously I only moved him a tiny bit, but I want to make sure that he's got a lot of ground on the runner. So if I get beat by if I get beat by Mbappe here, it's not detrimental. We can't play like an R1 cross in and score from that. So then once I've moved these two players back ever so slightly, then I move to Mendy and I try and drag Mendy back. Now, I get Mendy close enough to the point where, you know, and the angle that I'm covering here means that I can sort of watch him. So the way Joe Gomez is right now, if he wants to go this way, I can switch to Joe Gomez and nick the ball off him. That's absolutely fine. But with Mendy, I'm noticing that Lucas Moura is making that run, making that darting run through the middle of the centre-backs. And obviously, I'm controlling Mendy right now. So I want to make sure that he can't make that pass inwards, which I do. So I put him here. And at the same time, I want to make sure that if he does decide to go backwards and dribble backwards, I'm also close enough to be able to put a foot in, put a tackle in. And I basically, at the moment, I feel as if I've got Mbappe almost stuck. And, you know, the only way he can really go and escape is by running more in this direction. So he does that a little bit. And now you could say right here, I could have switched to Joe Gomez to make the tackle here. But I think, because if I let go of Mendy here, if I switch to Joe Gomez here, and obviously an L1 switch would be absolutely fine here, because there's two players in the vicinity of the ball, one of which I'm already controlling. So an L1 switch here is absolutely fine. Now, you could say, in fact, yeah, I agree. I could have switched to Joe Gomez here and made a tackle, and to be honest, that probably would have been a safe thing to do, but I'm still a little bit cautious about this run from Lucas Moura. So I mean, both of these scenarios do work. I can do both things and you know, be successful with it. So if I let go of Mendy here, I'm a little bit worried that before I can make the tackle, he can pass it inwards, and you know, Mendy's just gonna sort of drift a little bit. And obviously, I want to drag him back to a point where, if he does make that pass successfully, I can then make a covering run and try and make the tackle, or make sure that pass doesn't get there in the first place. So I stay with Mendy, and he turns, and obviously I've made the right decision, because if I'd switched to Joe Gomez and missed the tackle, Mendy would still be up here. He'd play the ball into Lucas Moura, and he'd be in on goal, a 2v1 versus Varane, which would obviously be a problem. So that is where I decided to stay with Mendy. Now, some people there would have switched to Joe Gomez and would have missed the tackle. They would have made the tackle at an unsafe time. And what I mean by an unsafe time is they would have made a tackle in this situation here. So from this distance, a lot of people make tackles when they're not actually close enough to their opponent for the tackle to be successful. And obviously in that case, he's going to press the tackle button and miss the tackle, and then he's pretty much out of the game for half a second, or however long it takes to recover. So in that situation, yeah, just stay on Mendy, and that is probably the safest thing to do, because then realistically, where is he going to go? If I bring Mendy back here in this line, then I've got one player marking there, one player marking there, and one player marking there. It's the safest scenario to be in. So yeah, that is another thing that people sometimes struggle with and sometimes get wrong. So hopefully that explanation has helped you out a little bit. Okay, so that was my guide to player switching. Now I really hope that's helped you out. And obviously, if it has, let me know down in the comments. Let me know if I've told you something that you didn't know before, or if I've cleared something up that you were confused about. Let me know down below. Obviously, I'm extremely happy with the support. I really appreciate all the support. And if you did enjoy, please do like the video, and please do not forget to subscribe. You do not understand how much that helps. Please subscribe to the channel for more content like this, and obviously other content to come. But no, have a good one, and I'll see you in the next one.